Coming up on Global Business, trade push. China and the EU have agreed to ramp up trade negotiations over the next 3 months, seeking to ease economic tensions. Jobs Watch. US non-farm payrolls report for June just dropped, a crucial gauge for where the Federal Reserve may take rates from here. And spending surge. The FIFA World Cup is fueling a spending surge right across China. We'll take a close look at how the latest consumer trends are shaping spending. Welcome to Global Business. You're watching CGTN. I'm Lincoln Humphreys. Our top story. China's Ministry of Commerce said Thursday that China and the EU have agreed to intensify trade negotiations over the next 3 months, following senior officials' talks in Brussels on Monday. Spokesperson He Yadong detailed the first meeting under the newly established China-EU Trade and Investment Consultation Mechanism, a regular communication platform that will hold 1 to 2 ministerial meetings annually. China has invited EU trade commissioners to visit this autumn for the second session. The spokesperson added that the first round focused on 3 priorities to steer the trade balance upward.
The first meeting focused on 3 key areas. First, emerging sectors, where both sides will strive to expand cooperation in areas such as AI and green transformation. Second, potential sectors, where both sides will explore the potential for cooperation in areas such as trade and services. And third, trade issues, where both sides will conduct consultations on market access to gradually resolve each other's concerns.
The European Union is throwing up new barriers this week to shield its embattled steel industry. In the new rules, the EU's annual tariff-free import quotas are slashed substantially. According to experts, this could drum up steel prices and create headwinds for EU-based manufacturers further down the supply chain. Our reporter Yo Yang has more.
The biggest impact on steel exporters will be the reduction of tariff-free import volumes by roughly 50% from current levels, along with the doubling of the out-of-quota duty from 25% to 50%. Turkey, the Republic of Korea, China, India and Indonesia were among the top 5 steel exporters to the continent in 2025.
The main issue is the allocation. According to a temporary agreement text reached between EU institutions, the bloc plans to give most of the duty-free steel import quota to its existing and future free trade partners. Thus, for countries like China, which doesn't have free trade agreement with the EU, will get even less duty-free quotas.
Why is the European Union adopting this new framework? The document published by the EU Council notes that the move aims at protecting its steel markets from what they call the negative trade-related effects of global overcapacity. But is this the truth?
A document released by the European Commission notes that by 2025, EU electricity prices were 2 to 3 times higher than those in the United States, and natural gas prices were close to 5 times higher. In other words, the industry's core challenges stem primarily from internal competitiveness issues.
In fact, one of the first sectors likely to be affected is Europe's own downstream manufacturing industry. For example, the European Automobile Manufacturers Association pointed out that if import levels remain consistent with those of 2024, downstream industries could face an additional 5 billion to 9 billion euros in tariff costs annually.
The European Union Joint Research Center also pointed out that the demand for electrical steel in the EU mainly depends on China and the Republic of Korea, which shows that its green transformation, automobile industry are based on the cross-border supply chains.
The measure has triggered widespread reactions. As early as November 2025, the WTO listed the EU's steel measures as a specific trade concern.
The Chinese steel industry strongly opposes the relevant measures of the European Union. The EU should abide by and correctly apply WTO rules, abandon zero-sum thinking, resolve concerns through dialogue and communication and achieve mutual benefit and win-win results.
WTO rules clearly stipulate that when a member modifies its tariff reduction commitments, it must engage in compensation negotiations with the member whose interests have been damaged and maintain a general level of commitment that is not lower than the original level. If negotiations cannot be reached, the affected members may also withdraw the substantial equivalent concessions, which is a built-in retaliatory right given to the affected members, including China.
有氧 CGTN 北京。
As European companies reassess opportunities in an evolving economic landscape, how are they viewing the Chinese market and what is shaping their confidence in its long-term prospects? CGTN reporter Zhang Zhenyi reports.
China and EU remain each other's second largest trading partners for goods, with bilateral trade exceeding $800 billion last year, making developments in the Chinese market closely watched by businesses across Europe.
The Chinese market is a fitness club for every company, and that includes multinationals, that includes European companies. And I think this is all about changing the processes, changing the decision making. It's good for China, but by the way, I think a number of companies now are using the Chinese way of running a business elsewhere in the world, which gives a lot of benefits.
There's a lot of opportunities in the China market and also to collaborate with Chinese companies and with Chinese technology to expand into global markets. And I think the 15th five-year plan has been very, very strong on sustainability and the green transition and is pushing that agenda forward. So, and that's another thing I always say to European companies, did you read the 15th five-year plan?
Beyond market opportunities, investor confidence is also shaped by the policy environment. Analysts say China's commitment to high standard opening up is helping provide stability and predictability for global businesses, offering a degree of certainty at a time when trade and investment conditions are becoming increasingly uncertain worldwide.
The 15th five-year plan also signaled that we are going to further uphold the principle of opening up. And I think global companies around the world will benefit greatly from these measures, especially I think the European companies.
As companies navigate a more volatile and uncertain global landscape, many view China's continued opening up as an anchor of stability and signal of long-term commitment to international business. Zhang Zhenyi, CGTN, 青岛.
Now, to further analyse the China-EU formal consultation mechanism, we're joined by Song Xin, CEO of Sinvol Consulting and a former policy advisor at the European Parliament. Thanks so much for joining us on the show. Now that China and the EU have established this formal consultation mechanism, how significantly will this change the dynamic for de-escalating disputes and strengthening economic stability long-term?
Okay, thanks for having me tonight. And first of all, I think having such a formal dialogue mechanism is definitely a positive step. At the very least, it helps to prevent both sides, from misreading each other's intention, and therefore there will be no, escalation in terms of trade matters, which is good. In the short term, so that kind of communication is absolutely unnecessary. But over the medium to long term, if China and EU truly want to achieve a more balanced, let's say, economic relationship, much more like a lot of more efforts needs to be done. First of all, I think it needs to recognize that the essential cause of the EU's economic challenges is not the so-called China shock or the China shock 2.0. The deeper issue is, as mentioned before in the footage, is Europe's growing reliance on regulation and legislation as a substitute to industrial competitiveness. So Europe, I think, is losing a lot of competitiveness during the past few years. And so right now, if they continue to impose tariff on Chinese export or create more, additional barrier for Chinese company operating in Europe, may somehow provide political reassurance, but it will not fundamentally solve the Europeans' competitiveness challenge. And second, I believe, China and EU have a bigger opportunity to move beyond today's, this called a zero-sum mindset and find a new balancing point, I will call it. Europe has world-class companies and highly innovative entrepreneurs, while China offers the world's most complete supply chains, a highly mature manufacturing ecosystem, and also an enormous domestic market. So China can provide European companies with the industrial skills and market opportunities that they need to commercialize innovation, strengthen their competitiveness, which is what they need. And ultimately, this can, bridge EU and China to a more brighter future, which is about a rebalancing point that we are really looking for.
Sure, many complementarities that will take a bit of work to sort out, I'm sure. But following the EU steel quota reductions, what impact do you expect on China's steel exports? And does this signal a broader shift in the industrial relationship between China and the EU?
First, I think it's important to put this into perspective because China is actually not the EU's largest source of steel imports, not even one of the top 5. The EU imports much more steel from countries like Turkey, South Korea, Japan, before Ukraine, and also the UK. So in terms of direct trade flow, the impact on China's steel export is likely to be relatively limited, I would say. However, I think the broader message is that the EU is has not been satisfied with the status quo in terms of, trade relationship. Therefore, the tighter steel quotas, together with the newly proposed Industrial Accelerator Act and the growing measures targeting the cross-border e-commerce are all pointing in the same direction, which is Europe is gradually building a more defensive trade and industrial policy towards China. And that suggests the relationship is entering a more complex or complicated phase. The risk, however, is that if Europe views its economic relations with China primarily through the lens of bilateral trade balance, then further trade friction becomes almost, inevitable. And the real question should be how can Europe strengthen its commercial competitiveness that they really want at the world level in long term? Because there is actually, as I said before, enormous room for a different kind of partnership. For example, China can empower Europe's traditional automakers with the very AI-driven autonomous driving system and the AI capacity. And China's embodied AI ecosystem can really help revitalize Europe's manufacturing capacity. And Chinese innovation in smart home appliance, energy storage can improve energy efficiency and climate resilience for European households. And that is all what Europe is looking for, right? So sometimes I think, the conversation in Brussels or between Brussels and Beijing should not only be focused on the status quo. We should, broaden our view to understand how to combine what we have in order to develop a strategy targeting the world market, which is much bigger and which can help us to jump out of the current box and to jump out of this zero-sum mindset.
Yeah, such an important relationship, not just for the countries involved, but also the world economy at large. Thank you very much, Song Sin, CEO of Sinvol Consulting and a former policy advisor at the European Parliament. Appreciate your insight. China is increasing trade ties with the UK. Britain's Trade Minister Peter Kyle has hosted Chinese Commerce Minister Wang Wentao in London, where they launched a new initiative to help more British businesses break into the Chinese market. Jeff Moody reports in London.
The China International Import Expo comes to London every year, but this time around there's an even greater sense of celebration.
Since the establishment of diplomatic relations over 50 years ago, our bilateral economic and trade ties have developed steadily and healthily, grounded in pragmatic cooperation and mutual benefit. In 2025, bilateral trade in goods has surpassed $100 billion and trade in services has exceeded $30 billion. Ladies and gentlemen, both China and the UK uphold multilateralism and free trade.
China's Minister of Commerce, Wang Wentao, is in town to chair the 15th UK-China Joint Economic and Trade Commission, or JETCO, with the aim of strengthening ties between the two nations and increasing growth, something his British counterpart wholeheartedly supports.
We want to keep momentum going, strengthening our work together in the areas that will benefit us both, and opening up new ways for our businesses to work together, to grow together, and to learn from each other. Serious engagement is back. By working together and talking together, both of our nations will prosper.
And that enthusiasm from the two governments, from the two delegations, is really trickling down to the business leaders themselves. They're making deals, they're making contacts.
There's no doubt that the Prime Minister's visit to China is creating another level of momentum. And I think that there is a feeling that there is opportunity and positivity on both sides to actually trade, to do things and get things happening.
The gathering today is full of energy. Business people from China and the UK are all very excited. We're all very interested and also hopeful of this booming market, which can be worth hundreds of billions of dollars.
But it's not just the money that's being discussed here today. There's a renewed sense of collaboration, of friendship, and a sense of optimism that the future for trade between the two nations has never looked brighter. Jeff Moody, CGTN, Central London.
Meanwhile, our anchor Jamie Owen sat down with Isabel Hilton to discuss her views on the central role that the services sector plays in the China-UK economic relationship.
I think it has been the centrepiece for some time, in the sense that it is the very positive side of what is quite an unbalanced balance sheet. And services do remain key strengths of the UK economy. And that includes, by the way, education, which we often forget when we talk about services. And that's been a very large part of positive bilateral engagement, despite the ups and downs in politics. But the total trade, you can see the importance of services if you look at where it fits in the picture. Total trade between the UK and China was upwards of 134 billion in 2025. That's up 5%. But there's a significant structural imbalance. So the UK has an 11.7 billion surplus in services, and that's important. The gap, however, in goods, the deficit is 51.4 billion. And the difficulty is that I really don't see that services will ever close that gap. So whilst it is very positive, we also have to address the other side of the balance sheet to have a balanced relationship.
Still to come on Global Business. Jobs Watch. US non-farm payrolls report for June just came out. A crucial gauge for where the Federal Reserve may take rates from here.
The world economy as we know it is about to change. Global business reports highlight emerging markets, developing countries, and dynamic sectors worldwide. We feature top analysts and newsmakers to provide perspectives on every facet of business. From an on-the-ground perspective, we provide you with balanced and objective assessments. Fast, sharp, and insightful. Global Business. Only on CGTN.
US employers added 57,000 jobs in June, down from the 172,000 created in May and far below the 115,000 Dow Jones consensus forecast. The US Bureau of Labour Statistics reported Thursday the unemployment rate dropped to 4.2%. Some predicted that the data may be distorted due to hiring linked to the FIFA World Cup. Goldman Sachs economists say private data from Homebase, a small business payroll firm, points to a World Cup-related boost of roughly 40,000 jobs last month. Analysts noted that the June non-farm payrolls report will be a key factor in evaluating the outlook for the US Federal Reserve's rate hikes this year. Fed Chair Kevin Warsh doubled down on the 2% inflation target on Wednesday and unveiled plans to overhaul the Fed's policy approach, but sidestepped questions on a July rate hike.
We've been an independent central bank for a very long time. We're going to be an independent central bank at this moment, and you're going to see no changes on that.
Fed Chair Warsh says the Fed is setting up multiple task forces next week to overhaul its policy approach. That includes tackling issues like its oversized balance sheet and over-communication with markets. He aims to move the Fed toward more real-time, data-driven decision-making with less reliance on lagging government statistics within a year. And in a panel with other major central bank chiefs, he predicted AI will deliver more jobs and greater prosperity. For today's college graduates in the US, the era of landing a single full-time job seems to be fading fast as AI erodes entry-level positions. That means a rise in so-called gigs, multiple part-time or freelance roles taken to make ends meet. Owen Fairclough has more.
When I entered the job market way back in 1998 as a graduate journalist, there was just one computer connected to the internet at the newspaper I worked at. It looked like this and sounded like this. You had to dial up through a landline to connect, if you could connect.
Technology has revolutionized our lives so much, today's graduates are now competing against AI while being bombarded with data and surveys showing just how fast machines are wiping out entry-level jobs. And for many of today's new generation of college-educated people, that means a patchwork of part-time work rather than the single-income employment I had. And some experts see vocational training as a better option than higher education to avoid the gig economy.
A lot of these vocational type jobs, for the most part, can find themselves AI proof, at least for the short term.
Surveys show just how much AI is impacting the graduate job market. ZipRecruiter's annual survey of graduates found there's more competition for fewer entry-level jobs. But recent graduates are landing jobs faster, nearly 80% within 3 months. Even so, the number of graduates who changed their major due to economic concerns about employability has doubled in the last year or so. Undergraduates are being advised to work while they study to accumulate experience that will make them stand out and to be adaptable.
If you find something remotely in your field, it may not be exactly what you want, take it. I mean, bird in the hand, because from there you might be able to work your way into the career of your choice within that industry.
Owen Fairclough, CGTN, Washington.
Now on to some other business headlines around the globe we're tracking for you this hour. A Financial Times report says OpenAI is in talks to give the US government a 5% ownership stake. It's the latest sign of growing pressure from Washington on AI companies, with lawmakers questioning both the risks of advanced models and who benefits from the AI boom. Google has lost its final appeal against a €4.1 billion EU antitrust fine for abusing its Android dominance, a landmark ruling that reinforces Europe's crackdown on big tech. And the China Securities Regulatory Commission has approved Unitree's registration for an initial public offering, clearing the way for the robotics company to list on the A-share markets. Under the rules, Unitree must complete its stock offering within the next 12 months. Now on to the 2026 FIFA World Cup. It's captivating audiences globally. In China, the phenomenon extends far beyond the television screen. The tournament has become a powerful catalyst for consumption, creating new economic trends across the country. CGTN's Zhang Siran reports.
Here in Shanghai, World Cup fever is powering a new consumer economy. Pop-up exhibits, exclusive merchandise, themed dining, and citywide viewing screens. A new commercial model is emerging, one that deeply integrates sport, social life, and immersive experiences.
My friends and I play football together every weekend. For the World Cup, we'll either be at someone's house or a local sports bar. It's great to finally get together for a drink after work.
I'm self-taught in German and French, so I've grown into European football culture. By subscribing online for the regional commentary, I can practice my language skills while enjoying the match.
As a fitness coach, I really focus on the players' physical conditioning. So many rising stars debuted this year. I've already got my eye on their professional training gear.
I studied in France where my friends took me to a few matches, and I just got swept up in the culture. I couldn't resist buying this sports-themed bag.
This passion is fueling the local retail and consumption. It's drawing in fans from around the world, including from one of the host nations, Mexico.
Mexico, Mexico. This is the first game because, that I've watched, and it's really nice. I really like it here. I think it's more international than in my hometown. I've been in Shanghai a little less than a year. It makes it fun.
Across the country, this fusion of sport, entertainment, and business is empowering urban spaces, attracting crowds and boosting nighttime economies. Experts say this powerful jolt to the consumer market represents a significant commercial shift.
我们称为叫玩转世界杯的这样的一种消费场景。
Consumption patterns for the World Cup have fundamentally changed. Instead of only watching at home alone, fans are planning getaway vacations around the games. A family might book a local hotel specifically for its high-quality viewing experience. This triggers a cascade of spending, from accommodations and transport to next-day tourism and leisure. The economic impact now extends far beyond the 90-minute match, becoming a powerful catalyst for urban consumption.
The World Cup's influence extends far beyond the pitch. It has become a powerful catalyst for a new consumption model worldwide, one that redefines fan engagement and transforms collective passion into tangible economic momentum. Zhang Siran, CGTN, Shanghai.
As fans around the world pack out pubs and bars to watch the Men's World Cup, another viewing experience is becoming popular in China. Football with dim sum. What a great combination. Our correspondent Siobhan McCall has the details.
Chinese fans have found a way to make the early starts for matches at this Men's World Cup more enjoyable with traditional morning tea. Many dim sum restaurants like this one are showing the matches. Here are the fans watching one of the screenings in Hong Kong. Now, this restaurant is open 24 hours a day, and the owner spent $25,000 on that huge screen. And there were huge celebrations when Erling Haaland, a crowd favourite in China, scored for Norway. This Xiaohongshu user says morning tea is the biggest winner of the World Cup, and that getting up early but eating well keeps them energised. And it's proving very popular in Guangzhou and Shenzhen, with more than 50 restaurants launching special World Cup packages. Meanwhile, according to local on-demand food platform Meituan, searches for Guangzhou morning tea have jumped by more than 250% since the start of the tournament, and it's likely to keep growing now that we're into the 10th knockout stages. International fans in China are also enjoying the experience. This Belgian supporter has been detailing his World Cup brunch, and he even managed to get some of the local residents to join in with supporting his team. It's catching on outside of China too, a restaurant in New York offering a similar experience for one of the Sweden games. And if you're wondering how to best enjoy dim sum with football, this website has even put out instructions for how much you should order. It recommends 10 to 12 pieces per guest for a knockout match.
What a delicious way to do the game. That is it for this edition of Global Business. I'm Lincoln Humphreys in Beijing. You've been wonderful company. We'll see you next time. Goodbye for now.